So hello everyone and welcome to another Meet the Author, and I am so excited today to be joined by the incredible June Sarpong, who has written another book, and this one is called The Power of Privilege: How White People Can Challenge Racism. And June, I just loved it. I loved it so much. It just really, it's just such an opportune time at the moment to get this messaging across. And what I thought I might do is just read the blurb about you at the beginning, just in case someone's been living on the moon since the 90s.
No problem.
It would be unbelievably strange, but I'll read it just in case, and then I can also show off your book at the same time. So look at the cover and make sure you purchase it and read it and do all the actions within it. June Sarpong, OBE, is one of the most recognisable British television presenters and broadcasters, and a prominent activist, having co-founded the WIE Network, Women, Inspiration and Enterprise, and the Decide Act Now Summit. In 2019, she was appointed the first ever Director of Creative Diversity at the BBC. June is the author of Diversify, an empowering guide to why a more open society means a more successful one, and The Power of Women, which proves the importance of feminism in the personal, social and economic progress of society as a whole. Both of those are also brilliant books as well. So thank you, June. Thank you for chatting with me. It's so lovely to see you again, albeit over the internet. I'd love to be giving you a hug.
Yes, I'm giving you a virtual one right now, Holly.
Me too. I just love my sort of the opening bit of your book where you say that there'll be some uncomfortable moments, but getting comfortable with being uncomfortable is the first major step in making a real difference.
Yeah.
And I absolutely love that, because I think, particularly as British people as well, we don't like having uncomfortable conversations.
No, not at all. We pretend that they don't exist and we avoid them at all costs. So 100%.
Exactly, but it also it's daunting. It's like sometimes you're worried you're going to use the wrong words, you're going to use the wrong phrases. So instead of using the wrong ones, you end up not using any at all.
Wow.
And I can see why people get nervous, but I think the more and more people have the conversations, the more it becomes normal. And I hope that like books like yours will encourage difficult conversations.
Totally.
And hopefully we'll have difficult conversations today.
Yes, let's do it.
So firstly, how on earth did you write a whole book so quickly? A book, and it is, and this is so relevant for everything that is going on in 2020. How did you do it?
Well, there's a backstory, Holly. So what happened was, so when I finished Diversify, and obviously I was on book tour, you and I did lots of fun things together. And I remember actually even you were one of the people asking. What happened was lots of white people would ask me about questions to do with race. And even though the book was about all underrepresented groups, the thing that kept coming up again and again was, how can I be an ally? What can I do? As you just said there, I don't want to say the wrong thing. I don't want to cause offense, etc., etc. And so I said to my publishers, I said, there's a book for white people. I said, I promise you, this keeps happening again and again and again. And so I started writing it based on also an incident, which I talk about in the book, where I was at a business dinner and I was hosting a session on inclusion, and a white guy who was on my table said, you know, how can we move from accusation to conversation? How can I, as a white man, be a part of the solution? And so I started writing the book, and my publishers were not convinced. They didn't think that there was particularly a market for it. So that was a couple of years ago. And then obviously the tragic, horrific killing of George Floyd happened. And then the sort of outpouring as a result of that. And so then my publishers were like, remember that book you were writing? I was like, yes. And they were like, well, could we update it and add everything that's going on now? And I was like, of course. And so the bulk of it had already been written. And then I just had to add everything that's happening now. And so
that makes me feel a lot better for how long. Brilliant that you had that in your back pocket to come out.
Yeah, very much so.
It's been such a awful year all round. But I just feel that with books like this, there's so much positivity that can come out of it, and people can learn and people can progress. And yeah, so yeah, well, thank you for putting pen to paper and having it ready to go, because I think people have that insatiable appetite at the moment right now.
Yes, very much so. And I just want to say thank you to you for always being an ally. I mean, you were doing this before it became part of the zeitgeist. And actually what's wonderful is when there are examples and allies that are ahead of the curve, as it were, you act as role models for other white people who also want to be a part of the solution. So I think it's really important to have those examples everywhere.
Oh, well, thank you. Definitely, I definitely want to learn, and I definitely want to take action as well. Before we dive into the book, it's so relevant for now. How did you feel on Saturday when Joe Biden got elected to be?
Well, the thing is, Holly, now that I'm at the BBC, I have to be completely impartial. So actually, like I haven't tweeted, I haven't even liked a tweet. I haven't done anything. So I sort of just watched from afar. But what I will say is, before I was at the BBC, I actually flew out during the Obama campaign to campaign for Obama. So I was there during Virginia, the final night before, the final rally where his grandmother had just died. And it was the funniest thing. So I was at the campaign office, and there was this older man in his early 90s, battered and bruised. And I was an older white man, battered and bruised. You know, we're in the South. And I was like, oh my goodness, what's happening? So I went over to him and I was like, are you okay? And he said, yes, I'm a farmer and I hit my eye on the rake. But I really wanted to play a part. My doctors told me to stay at home, but I still came out because I wanted to play a part in helping to elect the first Black president of the United States, because this man had been a segregationist in his youth. So he saw this as a way of redeeming himself. And that night, we all knew Obama was going to win. When that moment happened to me, I was like, oh, wow, this is what's happening in America. So actually, I think that there's a shift, even when it doesn't look that way, there's a shift happening all around.
Yeah, so true. In the book, you talk about people being labeled by color and not by their skill. Yeah. And on Saturday night, I was allowed to tweet and I was a bit torn, because I really wanted to shout about Carmela Harris and how amazing it is that she is the first Black lady. She's the first American to be in the White House. However, that wasn't then talking about her skill. You know, lots of people say that she's worked really hard, she's got education, she's got the skill set. And what's your sort of advice on that one? Even though she was the first Black vice president, it's been white men up until her.
Exactly. And there's that I don't know if you've seen that chart where it's like all the pictures of all the men and then her. Well, I think you have to acknowledge it, and I think we also have to celebrate it. I think when milestones happen, any kind of milestone, we have to acknowledge that moment, because it symbolizes change. But what we don't want to do is, once we've celebrated the milestone, we then don't want to only categorize that person by their point of quote unquote difference. But I think in the moment we have to. This is huge. It's never happened before. And you know, there were times in the 80s where they thought it was going to happen and it didn't happen. So I think we have to take this moment to sort of make a big deal out of it, no question.
Okay, good. I tried to fit in both her skill set as well. At Virgin, we have different diversity and inclusion groups at Virgin Management. So I head up our ethnicity group, and I've been doing that since March time, which has been a steep learning curve, but I've actually absolutely loved it. We've got 6 senior leaders, and they take on different areas, whether it's life stage or disability or ethnicity, LGBTQ and gender. And we have volunteers from across the group, and we're all talking with each other, learning from each other, giving each other reading resources. We're also just sort of making sure, looking out to other companies and seeing what they're doing. What can we do as Virgin to be game changing? You know, we want to be innovative, we want to be changing in all of these areas.
Yeah.
And I think books like yours is going to help groups like that. I mean, we can't be the only company with these groups, so there must be lots. And
yeah,
wrote it, were you thinking you would be a sort of a business book to help businesses?
You know, it's so funny, Holly. So the first one, so Diversify, was written just with people in mind. And obviously there's a lot in there about work, because I actually believe, and you and I have had this conversation a few times, I really do believe work is where we can sort a lot of this stuff out, because it's the one place where you're around people you don't choose to be around. And so if we make teams diverse, then people get used to being around those that are quote unquote different to them. So what happened with Diversify is it became a D&I tool, and all of these sort of HR professionals started using it. So after that experience with the others, I always had in mind, yes, this can be a group reading, a reading book for groups, ERGs, and sort of company employee resource groups. So for me, I definitely had that in mind, because it's one of those things where that's often where you can have the uncomfortable conversation. And actually, I think this book can be a great tool for helping to facilitate some of those uncomfortable conversations.
Yeah, because also I think conversations within businesses tend to be perceived as being harder. You know, with your friends, it's a bit easier, isn't it? You can zip up with what you're saying, but when in a sort of businessy situation, people are a bit more worried about that.
Yeah.
And Virgin trying to break down those barriers and just be like, no, look, we're all people. It doesn't matter that we're all colleagues, but we are all just, we're people.
Yeah, we're people. And we're all products of wider society. So yeah. And I have to say, I was so impressed. Remember a couple of years ago when you guys held your big sort of away day and you had all of your employees, just the questions that were up on the walls, like the really sort of thought-provoking, provocative questions that you were asking your teams, I was blown away by. Like, I haven't seen that in many places. So you are ahead of the game in that regard.
Well, we want to make sure we're staying ahead of the game, so
yeah.
pushing us forward with your books as well. You have action points within the book, 10 of them,
Yeah.
and I think that's the sort of real nitty gritty of what we can all be doing to help. Are you happy with me to go through each of those action points?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Answer on what they mean?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, fantastic. So action number 1 is achieve awareness.
Yes. I think that one is really important, because often when you come from the majority group, your lived experience doesn't necessarily allow you to understand that true inequality exists, and also the varying types of inequality, in the sense that there's a hierarchy of inclusion. Elite white men are at the top of that, and then you work your way down. And I think a lot of people don't understand that, and they don't understand the history behind this stuff. So I think it's really important to achieve awareness so that you understand the sort of historical context, and that you understand that inequality really does exist, and this is how it plays out in real life.
The historical context is a really interesting one, because I was never taught about that history in my education.
It wouldn't have been.
And when you start reading lots of books nowadays that unfortunately they've been written previous to this year, but they're percolating now up to the top so that everybody is reading them, you suddenly think, wow, there's such a wealth of amazing information and sadness that's happening in Black history. And it really should be put into our education system for people from an early age. And then I think then when you do enter the workplace, you have a much broader understanding of what's been going on.
Exactly. And also I think then we don't accept things as a given, because then we also don't feel helpless, because we understand how they've been designed and created. And that means that gives us the tools to be able to do something else and develop something new. And that's, for me, why it's so important that we all understand the historical context of this.
Yeah, and they're doing something new. You talk about recruitment practices.
Yeah, sure.
That was fascinating as well.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's just simple things, Holly, like going to different places to source talent. You know, if you're always advertising in the usual places, going to the usual institutions, of course you're going to get the same kind of person. And then also, when you understand the historical context and you understand what it is that some people in society have to deal with, and the fact that they are able to still overcome that and still thrive, that is a certain amount of resilience that is absolutely priceless for any business. That, you know, that's an asset. And I think understanding that really also helps to go a long way in how we recruit people and what skills we are recruiting people for as well.
Okay, so action 2, make a small step with a big footprint.
Yeah, totally. And I think sometimes it can seem daunting. It can seem as if, oh my God, this thing is so big. What can I as an individual do? And I think there's a lot. I think if you are let's say, even a stay-at-home mum, and your children do not go to the local state school. The beauty of Britain, unlike a lot of other places, is we're all in close proximity with one another. It doesn't matter what levels of wealth or what levels of poverty, we're never that far apart in the way that in many other parts of the world, everybody is separated via the sort of social economic background. So I think even if your children don't go to the local state school, make it your mission to volunteer there. And then more importantly, make it your mission to also make sure your children interact with those children so that they're not only just used to people from a similar socioeconomic background to themselves. So I think that's a really great way that even somebody who feels, well, what can I do, can actually make a big difference. The other thing also I think is really important is we all have to understand the value of this. So it's not seen as some sort of charitable act. No, this is actually beneficial both ways. And I think that also has to be understood.
Yeah, and actually thinking beneficial both ways, we try and do a lot of mentoring. And so sort of reverse mentoring and sort of different gender mentoring. But I have to be completely honest, I'd never thought about sort of different race mentoring each.
Yeah.
Instigating that now. So thanks for that tip too.
Fantastic.
So action 3, build sustainable inclusivity.
Yeah, very much so. I think with this one, Holly, it's really about making sure that we empower. So it's to your earlier point about being scared of getting things wrong. I think what we do a lot of is we are very quick to call people out when they get it wrong. But we don't do enough about celebrating people when they're getting it right. I mean, how many examples are you seeing of like, there's someone who's really doing it right? We're not doing enough of that. And I think that what's really important is that we make sure we are highlighting those that are getting it right, but we are also at the same time informing everybody about why this matters and that what we're doing is truly sustainable because we are removing all of the barriers to progress for those that come from diverse backgrounds. And so for me, it can't just be a sort of afterthought. It has to be something that we meticulously design, and therefore it will be long lasting. And as a result, we will benefit for generations to come.
Yeah, I think often people sometimes think it's going to be a quick fix as well, don't they?
It took a long time to get here.
Think how long that's taken, and it, you know, we've had to work really hard and we're not even there yet. And so I think we've just got to realize that this is going to be a process and we've got to get on that train now to make sure it happens as soon as possible.
Exactly, totally.
So action 4, do the white right.
Exactly. Well, I think it's similar to what I was saying about action 3. Actually, I think we need to do a lot more of celebrating those that are doing the white right thing. In that, when somebody is able to see how their actions can sort of obstruct someone's progress or enhance and promote somebody's progress, then you're able to see, actually, okay, I have a choice here. And I think that a lot of the time what happens with white privilege in particular is white privilege affords you the luxury of ignorance. And sometimes that ignorance can inadvertently make you complicit to a system that's unfair. So it's not intentional. It's just that actually people are living their lives in a way that superserves one group at the cost of everybody else. And I think that when we understand that, then we can then systematically decide to realize that it's not enough to just not be racist. You also have to actively be anti-racist. And that's what allyship is all about.
Yeah, and I love when people talk about, you know, that the old way of doing it was that you just didn't talk about race.
Yeah.
The way of doing it was that you used to say, you know, people
color.
Yeah. That was what people thought was the polite thing to say and do. But now you realize, no, you must realize there's differences. People have such different lived experiences, and everyone's got to really take the time to understand that.
Yeah, totally. And I'd just like to add to that as well, Holly, because the I don't see color sort of ideology is still very much steeped in the idea of white being the default for normal. So if somebody isn't white, I'm not noticing they are not white. And that's what we need to move from. Human is the default for being normal. And I think once we get there, then we're not uncomfortable with saying, oh yeah, that black person. Because that's one thing. Sometimes white people think it's offensive to use the word black. No, we like it. Black is good. For anyone who's scared or not sure what to say, black, it's fine.
No, that's good to know. That's the stuff that people absolutely have to know. What about people of color? Because it seems to be in the UK you say black, and in America you say people of color. Or do you think it doesn't matter?
Well, I think people of color tend to really be the definition for anybody that isn't white. So it's kind of what we would say for BAME here. And I think it's fine. But I do think that sometimes a lot of people, for whatever reason, think it's offensive to use the word black. And I think if somebody is black, it's absolutely fine to say they are black. In the same way if they're white, it's absolutely fine to say they're white.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So we've talked about this one a bit already, so there might not be much more, but you could let me know. Action 5, educate yourself about the past.
Yeah, very much so. Much like what we talked about in terms of one is acknowledging that inequality exists, and in this context, racism exists. And then 5 is really sort of going into the detail as to how we got here. We didn't just arrive here. There were lots of reasons. And I think when we understand the reasons, we'll do things differently.
Great. Okay, action 6, create a level playing field for women of color.
Yes, very much so. I think it's really important to ensure that we have an intersectional approach. I think when you look at many of the strides that have been made around gender, I think that can also be applied to women of color, and of course, in this particular context, Black women, because with the gender agenda, it's very much been focused on middle-class white women or upper middle-class white women. Actually, a lot of working-class white women do not feel connected to the feminist movement for that reason. And I think it's really important that we take an intersectional approach. We understand that actually the lived experience of women is different based on whatever group that they come from and whatever multiple levels of underrepresentation they may have. And then we design for that. You know, if you look at entrepreneurship, Black women are the fastest growing entrepreneurship group in the States, similar here, but don't have the same levels of support as other women. So I think when we really sort of understand that, then we can design systems specifically for women that are perhaps the most discriminated against in society.
I had a really good conversation recently with Sophia Menley, and they started the Black British Business Awards.
Oh, wonderful.
They're absolutely wonderful women, but they were just saying it's a really simple question. You just say, is everyone in the room?
Yes, so, my favorite question. Yeah.
Is everyone that should be here in the room, and are we a fully diverse room?
Yeah, simple as that. And if they're not, why not? And what are you going to do about it?
Yeah. They also said something else I loved, but just about the diversity and inclusion agenda as a whole. But they were saying how diversity is being asked to the party,
Yeah.
and inclusion is being asked to dance, and that's sort of really,
yeah,
in such a nice way.
totally, exactly.
Mm. Okay, action 7, make a bigger pie.
Oh, very much so. Because the thing is, Holly, with this issue, some people feel fearful because we're looking at it through the lens of the old model, which is my win means your loss. And actually, what I'm saying is we've never had a society where we've invested in everybody, where everybody has been able to fulfill their potential and therefore contribute to the best of their ability. And I believe when we do that, what we have instead is a much bigger pie. We create something that we've never had before in society. And actually, business is a place to test this out and actually be able to create a model that can work and then be scaled and replicated for policy making too. So I think it's really important that when we're having this discussion, particularly with those from the majority group and those with the most agency, is we explain to them that this is not about saying your time is over, not at all. We totally understand your value. And what we're saying is that there are others who haven't been valued in the same way. And when we do that, even you benefit. There's a great quote from Margaret Mead, and what she says is every time you liberate a woman, you liberate a man, because what you do is you raise the standards for everybody. And I think that applies for all underrepresented groups.
Yeah, and I love what you said about businesses driving policy change, because it does take a long time if you try and do all of these things through governments.
Yeah, it takes too long.
Businesses can make quick decisions and actually drive things forward as much quicker. And you're so right, then be spilling over into what the government is.
Totally. Yeah. And businesses also see the benefits quicker because you're able to see it, your bottom line really quickly, in the way that society just takes a while, doesn't it? So.
Okay, action 8, be an ally, inspire more allies.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, we've been talking about this. I think role models matter. So often we talk about role models in relation to those from underrepresented groups. So even like what we were saying about Carmela Harris, it's always about somebody who is the sort of outlier. So, the great woman who's now a judge, the disabled person who is now the CEO of a Fortune 500, blah, 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 blah. But I think also it's so important that we talk about role models in the context of white leaders doing things differently, and white leaders that are actively inclusive, and how they can be examples for their colleagues and for other leaders to also follow suit.
So important. Okay, action 9, redefine what it means to win.
Yeah, again, back to what I was saying, this is not a zero-sum game. This is something new. And I suppose because we haven't really had it, there's a part of us that maybe doesn't believe it's possible. I believe it is. And I think that actually when we are able to demonstrate this new way of being that says everybody can win, everybody really can win. And when we do that, it's better for us all.
I know, I love it. You and Simon Sinek both sort of sing hymn sheet, and it's something that I really feel very passionate about as well.
Yeah, totally. And we love Simon. Anything he says.
Anything the two of you say, we all. Action 10, act now.
Yes, don't wait. We need it now. We need it now. And also I think I know how passionate you are about young people and the next generation. I think the next generation won't stand for it, Holly. You look at the social attitudes of millennials, but even more than millennials, Gen Z, and even Generation Alpha, who are coming, when they're sort of forecasting of how they're going to think. They are just naturally much more inclusive than previous generations. And I think businesses that don't in any way factor that in to their sort of processes will feel that. So it's so important.
Yeah, I agree. And that's in all areas of purpose.
Yeah.
Businesses they absolutely have to be doing the right thing, because there's a negative to social media, but the positive side is that young people are going to be calling out businesses that are not doing the right thing across.
Right? I mean, and we saw it with George Floyd and the whole Black Lives Matter movement, in the sense that when those companies that were posting the black boxes first, in some bit of virtue signaling, the next question became from the consumers, from the customers, well, show me your executive committee, show me the makeup of your workforce. I mean, who knew customers would be asking questions like that? That's the difference with this new generation. It's amazing.
It really is. So thank you for your 10 points, because they're easy digestible, they're easy to action. It's a really, really lovely read. Like it's so interesting, every single page of it. And I really recommend to everyone to go out there and buy the book. And there was something else in it actually that really you got me thinking, but it's something I'd heard before, but it's so good to hear again, was the devastating thing that Immanuel Kant did by ranking races.
Yeah.
And it just makes me feel, I mean, maybe you could explain a little bit about that, but I just have to get off my chest that it makes you feel so angry that something like that can still be so relevant today, that people still believe it.
Yes. Yeah.
People still believing that the world is flat.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now.
Yes.
Our genes are all the same. Like, how can there be this belief that we rank our classes in different levels? But anyway,
it really is. And it was, it was one of those where obviously it was sort of at the beginning of much of what then became sort of the imperialist movement and the colonization. And there needed to be a way of selling it to people so that they would accept it. Because at the end of the day, if you classified everybody as human beings, there's no way you could accept that kind of brutality as normal. And so the easiest way was to rank people based on race, and obviously everything that was white was elevated, and those characteristics were then the sort of ideal, and you worked your way down from there. And also because it came from such an eminent thinker, it was able to take hold really quickly, and for people to latch onto it and think, oh yeah, of course this must be true. Oh no, we won't question this. And can you believe hundreds of years later, Holly, this stuff is still playing out today? And that's why this education piece is so important. So to understand that actually the beliefs of a very small section of society have impacted us all for centuries. And it's now time to undo and unlearn that limiting thinking.
Yeah, and I think this is where science is going to hopefully save us again.
Yeah, yes.
Science is
for science, especially right now.
I know. I mean, science is going to prove, has proved that 99.9% of everybody is exactly the same. And I'm going to just finish with this quote that's also in your book, but it's from the geneticist Spencer Wells. And it says, it's worth getting the message out that we are related to one another, that we are much more closely related genetically than people may suspect from glancing around and looking at these surface features that distinguish us. Race, in terms of deep-seated biological difference, doesn't exist scientifically.
Yeah, it doesn't.
No.
It's a social construct.
We need to be continually shouting that from the rooftops.
Yeah.
From the rooftops, and making sure everyone reads it, everyone learns, everyone takes action, and the action points are in this book of what we've got to do.
Holly, it's been such a pleasure. It really. And again, I can't say it enough. Thank you for all that you do, because this is how we create change. This is how, for the time when your children grow up, things will be very different. And it's because of everybody playing their part to make that a reality.
Well, we'll have to all make sure that happens.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much for your time today. It's been lovely talking to you.
Always. Mwah, big kiss. And I look forward to seeing you in person next time.
Me too.